So they're heading up towards Mynydde Mawr, that mountain on the right hand side. Look to the left, that's actually Snowdon. And that little peak in the distance is the highest point in England and Wales. When you're out and about in the mountains, it's definitely worth keeping your eyes peeled for any edible fruit. Here's a few wild bilberries or wimberries, depending on where you're from, and very tasty, and they in quite an abundant volume here at the moment in the mountains. You can see this bush here. Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be talking about a very simple survival tin for day hikes here in the UK. So what got me thinking about this subject was, looking at a lot of survival tin videos on YouTube, and they're very much geared around the sort of SAS survival tin that, Lofty Wiseman put together. And a lot of people supply cheap to very expensive ones. Think of the SE version as a very expensive version, very nice. But a lot of them are more geared towards sort of long-term survival and maybe a more military sort of angle where you're doing escape and evasion for a long extended period of time in a very remote wilderness. Now, most of my time in the wild in the UK tends to be in sort of mountains that are quite accessible, and they're often a day hike or an overnighter. So it's also unlikely to be extremely remote. But what we do have in the UK is a sort of complacency about how quickly weather conditions and how these mountains can become they can feel quite remote quite quickly. So often people will set off from a nice warm village in the valley, head up into the mountain on a day trip. They often don't take enough gear with them, and then it's amazing how quickly you can be disorientated. The mist comes in on the peaks, it gets very cold, and all of a sudden you find yourself in quite a difficult situation. So I've been playing around with some ideas of what I would think is a reasonable solution to just taking something quick and easy, pick it up as you go out, put it in your day bag, and you're going to have some contingency in case the weather changes. Now, I'm just assuming, and it hopefully goes without saying, that heading into the mountains, even just for a day hike, it's worth being prepared. You need to take something warm like a beanie, some wet weather gear. So that really should just be standard items that you take with you when you head out into the mountains. Typically, you'd also be carrying your water with you. You can't really rely on the streams. The water is not necessarily always clean. So presume you're going to have some water and possibly some sandwiches in your lunchbox. I've just got a small 18-litre day bag, and I brought that on purpose because I typically will have a slightly larger, maybe more muted coloured rucksack that I would take into the forest because I quite like blending in. But I think with day hikes, a lot of people will tend to use a small bag, and often quite a colourful one, which actually is a very good idea, because if you are isolated and the weather conditions close in, it can be useful to have something quite visible. And in this case, quite bright colours, and the inside also is quite bright, so if you wanted to be seen by a helicopter or something, this would stand out. So the section of the country where I live, we're in the foothills of Snowdonia, and frequently we see the rescue helicopter flying overhead and looking for people that are stranded in the mountains. Now, they're very accessible and they seem to be quite benign mountains to climb in and hike in, but it's amazing how quickly conditions deteriorate and people need help. Now, I see this helicopter flying over so often, and in fact we saw it on the way in today. Really illustrates the point that you should not get complacent in these mountains. So another reason I chose the small bag was to illustrate the point that you don't need to take a lot, and you can fit something like a small survival tin in to quite a small space. Now, I have also brought my first aid kit, which I pretty much always take with me. Very useful to have, and that actually has got some extra items in there, so I've got some built-in redundancy, but that won't be the subject of this video. So as I said, it easily fits into a small bag, and I've got this extra bit of kit that will see me through an emergency. So my starting point has been this MSR stainless steel cooking pot. It's the Seagull range, and I've added a Trangia fastener to it. Now that actually does function as a extra bit of tie-off kit or a tourniquet or something like that. Now I know you could get lighter versions. This is the stainless steel version, so slightly heavier, but really for a day hike you're not carrying a lot of gear. It doesn't add that much extra weight. So I quite like these. They're different sizes, but you know, there's a number of different options you could use. So in the lid here, foil blanket, so just a space blanket, always useful, particularly if you get cold and you're stranded in the mist. A useful thing to have. And I also have one in my first aid kit. Now a couple of things, theory behind this. You want a pot to heat water in. You need something to heat that water, and then you need something you can drink to keep you warm. So that's really the premise I've gone for on this particular tin. So what I found quite useful is some of these sachets where you get hot chocolate or coffee and tea. So you've got a few options, but it just allows you to heat up your water and get a warming drink into your body to start heating up your core temperature. Also brought a snack, which obviously helps to give you some energy. You presumably would also hopefully have had your lunch that you've brought with you, so this is really just emergencies. But if you've already had your lunch and you're staying for longer than you planned, some extra food is always useful. I've also got a knife in my tin, probably not essential, but I quite like the fact that, you know, you have a blade if you need it, but also these scissors on these Swiss Army knives can be very useful, you know, for trimming bandages or things like that. I've actually found them to be very useful. You get some with a saw as well, and the saws can be quite useful as well for processing kindling and things like that. Now you may already have a compass in your kit, but I have an extra one in this one, and it's just an extra level of security. Compasses can be so useful if you want to get yourself off the mountain in the mist, so always good to have a compass in there. Some form of fire lighting. In this case I've got a ferro rod. It's always pretty reliable, but in my first aid kit I also have a lighter, so 2 levels of fire lighting available. And this is my form of heating, my method for boiling my water. In this case a Trangia burner and extra fuel. I have the little stands that you can add to the top of the Trangia, put your pot on, and then also a folding mug. And these are the Swiss Army style folding mugs or folding cookses, and you know, they fold up very small, very lightweight, but very useful. Something that's always worth considering is to try and find a more sheltered spot. When you're up on the mountains, in the wind chill and the mist and the cold can be quite extreme quite quickly. Get yourself down into a more sheltered spot. In this case I found an old deserted mine shaft. I'm halfway up the mountain, and it's a really good spot when the weather comes in. Just something out of the wind where you can shelter easily and cook your brew. So it's quite remarkable how quickly these Trangia burners can actually boil water. It's boiling, and it's only been, I think, just under 4 minutes. I just came out of the shelter because actually it's brightened up really nicely. It was raining when I first went in there, but really nice now. I must say, this particular brew, it's a sort of coffee blend, really creamy, quite sugary. It's almost perfect for what you need if you're cold and wet and want to warm up. I also managed to, the bilberries I picked on the way up, just adding a nice little snack to my brew. Really good. Anyway folks, once again thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.